In this episode of the Godot tutorial series to make your own tower defense game, we're going to be creating this map. Let's dive straight in. The first thing we'll have to do is take some of the assets which we downloaded in the last tutorial, part 0, and put them in our project folder. I'm here in the folder where we've downloaded the 2 asset packs, and if you haven't watched the last tutorial yet, part 0, I suggest you do that first. We're only going to be using in this tutorial the top-down tanks Redux asset pack. Clicking into that one, you'll see a couple of folders, among which the tile sheet. The tile sheet has both a default and a retina version, and with any assets in this entire tutorial, we're only going to be using the default ones. Clicking into this image, you'll see that this is made up of several tiles that are going to be basically the building blocks for the base layer, the grass, the roads over which our enemies will run or drive. We're going to be taking this image, so I'm going to Control-C, copy that. I'm going to go into my Godot project, which we have made the folder structure for in the last tutorial already. I'll click into Assets, Environment, TileSet, and I'll paste it in there. Next up, we're going to need some assets to make the map a little bit more lively. We want some trees so that we can strategically place them and limit the player on where he can and cannot build. And we want to use some crates. The crates are going to be there for a game mechanic that the player can get some initial cash injection at the start of a map to make sure things are a little bit more speedy at the beginning stages of a map. So we're going to go back to our assets folder where we have downloaded our asset packs, top-down tanks Redux, and we could go into the sprite sheet and take the sprite sheet with our green tree, our brown tree, our wooden crate and our metal crate, but we would have to cut them out of the sprite sheet. The sprite sheet is comprised of sprites with all kinds of different sizes, so it's not very intuitive. It doesn't work intuitive. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the separate PNG files that are also in this asset pack. Again, we use default size, not retina. And here you see all those different sprites that we just saw in the sprite sheet, but then separate per image. So we're going to be using this. I'm going to be searching for a tree. And here we go. We got our big tree, both green and brown. I'll copy these and we'll go back to our project, our assets, our environment, our props, and we'll put our 2 trees there. Gonna go back to my folder, that's one too far, into my assets, top-down tank Redux, PNG files, default, and I'm gonna look for my crates. And I want these top-down versions of both the wooden and the metal crate. And with that, I'll go back a little bit into my project again, assets, environment, props, and I'll put them in there. Now, when we go to Godot, our Godot project, you'll see very quickly that bar popped up. Now it has imported those files. So when we go over to assets, environment, props, we'll see we got our crates and our trees there. In the tile sheet, we have our tile sheet for the terrain. Now that we have the assets in our project, we can start building the first map. Every map that we create is going to be a new scene within our project. So we go over to scene, we select new scene. As we're making a 2D tower defense game, we select the 2D scene to be the root node of this new scene we are creating, and that automatically switches us to the 2D viewport. You can switch viewport on the top here, where you can switch between 3D and 2D. As we're making a 2D game, I expect we'll remain in the 2D viewport throughout this entire tutorial series. Next, we probably want to rename the root node of this scene to represent an easy recognizable name so we can easily call it in the code once we get to that part. So far, this is not much, so we'll have to add a new child node, and we're going to be adding a tile map. A tile map is going to be splitting up our view into cells. As you can see, we've now got a raster with all these cells, and we can paint every single one of these cells with a certain image. And that's where we have the tile sheet for that we've put in the assets. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to match the cell size to the size of the tiles in the asset pack you've downloaded or the tile set you've created yourself. You can do so on the right hand side under the cell parameters. You can change the X and the Y. It so happens that the tiles that are provided by Candy.nl are 64 by 64, so we don't actually have to change that right now, and we can leave that as it is by default. To actually start painting these tiles, we have to define the tile set. We can do so here on the second parameter from the top. Tile set says empty now. We're going to click it and we're going to select new tile set. That doesn't really change much, but when we click on it one time, that opens up the tile set editor on the bottom of the screen. This screen might be bigger or smaller for you. You can change the size by dragging it in or out. And you can even make it full size with the double arrow on the bottom left. You can probably just see my cursor underneath my camera there. Now, to get this started, we're going to drag the terrain tiles that we have put in our Godot project folder, and we're going to drag it to this dark blue area here. Let's put these tiles on the tileset editor. You can zoom in and out using your scroll wheel of your mouse and holding Control. That way you can make sure it's sized in a way that you can work with it. The first thing we want to do is we want to create a random tile. There's not a tile we're going to use, but we want to unlock the snapping option. So I'm going to select new single tile here. I'm going to select a random region, and now we get this toolbar and we can enable the snapping option. Now for the snapping options, we got to make sure that it snaps to a tile size that is equal to our cell size, so 64 by 64. I've already got my options open here, but probably it starts like this. You're going to click into the snap options and we'll set the step to 64 by 64. Now you can see that the tile we have drawn is nowhere near what the tile should actually be, but by simply clicking one of the cells now, you now select the region of 64 by 64 with those snapping options. And we can create more tiles like this. So I can select new single tile and a new single tile, etc., etc. Now what this actually does is when we click into the tile map, by clicking on tile map one time, that switches us back to that 2D viewport. You now see that we have these tiles on the right hand side in this panel. Now I can click one of these tiles and I can start painting the various cells that we have in our raster. Now, of course, there's a couple of options to paint quicker. We can, for example, create a square, and we would be able, with the toolbar on the top, select the bucket fill, and we'll be able to paint everything at once. Now there's a problem here, or problem. Human eyes have a tendency to recognize patterns really quickly. And as the art of these tiles is identical to each other, we quite quickly recognize the pattern of, well, basically square boxes. In order to break that up, we want to use a second grass tile, or even more grass tiles in some tile sheets, to break up that pattern and make it completely random. So what we'll do, I'll right click all these tiles away. I still got bucket fill selected. So if I would have single tile, to teach you a little bit how this works, you can now delete tiles by using your right mouse button, but with bucket fill, it will delete all the tiles that are connected. So that's a quick way to delete everything. I'm going to click back into the tile set. I'll open up this particular image and I'm going to be deleting all the single tiles that we've now created, because this is not the most efficient way to do it. We'll delete these single tiles. Now that you've learned how tiles work, we'll create a new auto tile. Auto tile basically allows Godot to select a tile based on a certain rule set. I'll get into how the rule set works exactly once we get to the roads, but for now, just follow along as we go. I'm going to select the region that I want the Godot to be able to select from. So it's going to be able to select from this region, and in the select a tile, we have the sub-tile size here in the parameters, which is 64 by 64. So we have a region of 64 by 128 selected, and with the sub-tile size parameter, Godot knows that, well, okay, there's going to be 2 tiles in there, and he knows how to cut that region up in order to define the 2 tiles. For the auto tile here, I'm going to switch from 2 by 2 to 3 by 3. The reason why is very complex, definitely not for this tutorial. Know that in 99.9% of the cases, you're going to use 3 by 3 minimal, so you don't have to worry about that right now. Now, with bit mask, we can set up the rules how Godot needs to be selecting these various auto tiles. And I'm going to be painting the 3 by 3 box that is being created by that 3 by 3 auto tile rule, or the auto tile bit mask rule. Now, if we go back to the tile map, we only have one tile here, but that tile is an auto tile. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to make sure I'm on single pane on bucket fill, and I'm going to be creating a region which is one tile outside this blue line, outside the viewport. The reason that I want to go one tile outside the viewport is because the rules that we have just given with this bit mask only allow Godot to select one of these grass tiles at random when the tile is not a border of the bigger selection. So right now I've got the borders. All of these borders will have exactly the same tile, and we can't change that. That's how we set up the rules. But now with bucket paint, when I paint the center, you'll see that now it has randomly selected one of these two tiles. So for example, you can see that this tile right here and this tile right here, they are not the same. You can see that on the top right here, if you focus on one particular element, so you've got these two green dark patches or dark green patches here, but here there's two smaller green patches over there. So you can see how now it has randomly selected a grass tile for all these different tiles that we've painted, and that concludes our grass field. We can rename this and we'll call this the ground layer. Now the next layer, I want to put two layers on top of each other here, and the reason I'll get to in a moment. We're going to go to map, we'll add another child node, and we'll add another tile map. Now this tile map is going to be the tower exclusion layer of the map, because we don't want the player to be able to build a tile on a tree, we don't want the player to be able to build a tile on a crate, and we don't want the player to be able to build a tile on a road. In order to do that, we're going to be, every single time that the player tries to build a tower, we're going to be asking the tower exclusion tile map node if the cell where the player is going to try and build something, if it's already being occupied by a tile, if it's already painted, basically. That way we know when we have to basically allow the player to build and when not to allow the player to build. We'll get into those mechanics and how we're going to code that in a later tutorial. For now, we just have to make the map. For the tile set of the tower exclusion tile map, we're going to follow the same process, but now I have a good opportunity to learn you how AutoTiling works. We're going to select again new tile set, we'll click into it, we'll drag our terrain tiles to it, we'll create a new auto tile, and I'll select the region of all the roads. Again, I'll make sure that the auto tile bit mask is set to 3x3 minimal. And this is pretty much everything what you know already from the grass tile. So now let's go over how Godot knows which tile to place where. Switching to the bit mask tab here, we can paint this road, for example, as follows. We're painted vertically over where the road actually is. Now, if we were to paint this road in a similar fashion, where we paint with our 3x3 bit mask the parts where the road actually is, Godot, when we are placing these tiles and it's auto tiling, what Godot tries to do is it's trying to match the bordering bit mask to other tiles. So Godot, with this setup, knows that he cannot place these tiles next to each other in any sort of way, because there's no way that the red border of this tile can be matched with the red border here, where there's only two small strokes. However, if we have a crossing, for example, and we were to paint it like such, Godot knows that it would be able to place this tile on top of this one. However, it also forces there to be a tile on the bottom and on the left. So if we were to have a tile, this particular tile on top and bottom, and this one on left and right, Godot will know how to paint that. And I can demonstrate that to you. So we go to our tower exclusion. I'll temporarily turn off the ground layer using this eye icon. And now with this terrain, it will automatically, oh, probably still on bucket. Yes, gotta make sure you're on a single tile paint. Godot will also always, if it doesn't know or doesn't have an option, it will always pick the top right tile or the first tile that was defined in the auto tiling. So this works. This doesn't work because Godot cannot find the combination. Now Godot still cannot find the combination where it works. However, if I place this tile, Godot knows how to work with this tile from top and bottom. However, these two tiles still don't know anything because they cannot match on the right hand side. However, if I start building here, Godot starts to know how to combine these bit masks together. Now if we switch back to the tile set, we can define that for each and every single one of these roads. I don't want to use this particular tile because I don't think that is a very logical tile to use in our tower defense game, but I will use all the other ones. So we know that we can paint this as such. These are simply corners. These are also corners, and there we go, and there we go. Now with all of these bismask painted, and let's remove these tiles, I can now paint a road without having to worry about any of the particular tiles and how they work. And that looks pretty good. Now with bucket paint, I'll quickly delete it. I'll go back to my ground layer. I'll activate my ground layer. And now I'm gonna paint the roads. Now, remember that we have the viewport, this blue line. That's what the player can and cannot see. If I just make sure that the road starts outside of what the player will be able to see, then it doesn't matter that that last piece of road is not correct. We can simply ignore that. We consider, for example, now say, okay, the enemies are going to start coming in here. They're going to go up. They're going to go left. Maybe we'll allow them to take 2 different paths. And those paths then come together again. And then maybe it goes up and out of the map. Now, as such, if we were to play this scene with the button here on the top right, we have to save it first, so let's do that. We will save it in our scenes, and in scenes I have a folder maps. That's a perfect place to save it. And now if we play the game, you can see that we don't have any negative side effect from the fact that our last 2 pieces of roads on the left and right are the wrong tile, because simply that is not being displayed as it is outside our viewport. And now we have a beautiful road, and you have a very quick way how to draw roads without having to select all these single tiles one by one. Now we have to add some trees and some crates. So let's first add some trees. We're going to go into our tile set again. I'll make this a little bit bigger, and we'll drag our 2 trees into this dark blue box. For the trees, it's very easy. This is just going to be a single tree or a single tile, and for the second tree, exactly the same, single tile. Now on our tower exclusion map, we can select our trees and we can start drawing these into the map. Now I'll just add a couple of them, left and right. We'll add some green trees as well to create a little bit of variation. And there we go. Now we have some trees on the map. And because we have 2 different tile maps, the grass of the tile map is still being displayed. If we wouldn't have 2 layers, we wouldn't have the grass background underneath the tree, which is of course desirable. So with these 2 layers on top of each other, we're able to create a nice effect without too much trouble. Now the way that it is drawn is following the order of the nodes. So if we were to switch these around, we can drag these nodes around. For example, if we were to drag ground underneath the tower exclusion, we wouldn't see our tower exclusion tiles anymore, as now the ground layer is drawn above the tower exclusion layer. So when you're working with layers, do make sure that you put them in the right order for exactly the way that you want the different assets to be displayed. So I'm gonna drag that back around. Now we need to add some crates. We're gonna follow the same process. We click into our tile set. We're going to drag our crate metal and create wood to the dark blue area here. And now you'll see that these crates are actually not 64 by 64. These have a smaller size. So what we'll do is we'll create a new tile. We'll first select the entire 64 by 64 and we'll change that in the snap option. We're going to set the snap to the actual size of the image, which is 28 by 28. Now we'll select the region of that crate. However, we are painting on a background or a tile map which has a cell size of 64 by 64. And we want this crate to be nicely in the middle of that tile and not to be in the top corner. So to do that, we're going to texture offset this particular tile. Now, the tile is 28 by 28. The cell is 64 by 64. So that means we got 36 basically left over, and we need the half of that in order to place the texture in the middle of the cell. So we're going to texture offset this by 18 by 18. We'll do exactly the same for the wooden crate, new single tile. We still have the 28 step selected, and we'll do the texture offset 18 by 18. Now going into our tower exclusion tile map, we can now select both of these crates, and as you can see, we're now drawing them nicely in the middle of the tile or of the cell, and that is going to be our crates, which the player will be able to destroy to get an initial cash injection and build some extra towers at the starting stages of the game. Alright guys, that was it, your first map for your tower defense game. If you like this video, then smash that like button and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Forward the video on Twitter and Reddit to other game developers or share it with your friends. It helps me out tremendously as a creator in making these series. Now in the next tutorial we're going to be working on the tower, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I suggest you maybe practice a little bit with the skills that I've been teaching you today. So maybe you can create a new scene, call it map number 2, use those desert tiles and desert roads to see if you can create a second map. That kind of practice will help you with your muscle memory and will make sure that you retain the skills that I've taught you today. Good luck with that. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Until then, keep on gaming, keep on coding. See you later, guys.